Hiram Taine came awake to Towser barking and scratching at the bedroom floor. "Shut up!" Towser cocked an ear at him and went right back to it. Taine couldn't ever remember the dog making such a row over a plain mouse. It was a fine summer morning, sun pouring through the window, and Taine thought wistfully of fishing before. He remembered he had to drive out Woodman Way and dicker over an old maple four-poster he'd heard about. Getting so a man couldn't make an honest dollar anymore, what with everybody getting smart about antiques. Leave that woodchuck be today, you'll never dig him out. He went to check the sign that hung crooked by the driveway. "Handyman. I fix anything. Antiques for sale. What have you got to trade?" Just the wind, probably, that had worked one chain loose. He straightened it and looked a while at Turner's Woods across the road, a fine stand of timber full of boyhood forts, and hoped no smart operator ever got around to putting up houses on it. In the kitchen, the stove wouldn't light until he hauled off and kicked it, same as always. Someday he supposed that trick would stop working and he'd actually have to fix the thing. And he snapped on the radio out of old habit before he remembered it too was broken. There was a clatter out front. Beasley, the Hortons' yardman, backing a rattling old truck up the drive with the wall. Abby Horton riding beside him and her enormous old television set roped down under a garish quilt and back. "Good morning, Hiram. Can you fix this set again? Never saw anything I couldn't fix. What you really need is a new one, Abby. This one's getting old." That's just what Henry says. He wants one of the color sets. But I won't part with this one. It's radio and record player both, and the wood matches my other furniture, and besides... Yes, I know. He'd heard it all before. Poor Henry, he thought. Boss of the whole computer plant all day, and coming home every night to a life of petty tyranny. He and Beasley wrestled the monstrous thing down into the basement, Abby following behind, eagle-eyed for scratches. While Beasley muttered under his breath that she was on the prod today, and always was when she started early. "Why, Hiram, you put in a ceiling. It looks a whole lot better down here." Taine looked up. There was in fact a ceiling, smooth, white, without a seam in it, where the bare joists had always been. He had not put it there. Something I thought up. He was glad when she finally huffed off up the stairs. Unpersuaded about a piece of china, he tried to interest her in on the way out. Alone, he climbed on a chair and rapped his knuckles on the new ceiling. It rang like a thin glass goblet. He fetched a drill, pressed a bit against it with all his weight, and the bit went ping and the broken end sailed across the room without leaving so much as a scratch. Upstairs, he pried back a corner of the living room carpet and drilled down into the floor instead. The bit went smoothly through the old oak, and then stopped dead, as if against solid rock, where there was supposed to be nothing at all but open space between the joists. He worked a flashlight into the little hole, and something down there caught the light and glinted back at him. He gave it up over coffee and donuts. His money-making Yankee soul rebelling at the waste of a whole morning on a puzzle that wasn't going anywhere. There was a four-poster bed out Woodman Way that some city dealer might get to before he did, and a mystery, after all, would keep. He fed Towser, loaded a spare TV set, and a shotgun, and a few other trade goods into the truck, and drove off for the day. He got back late, well satisfied. A four-poster, a rocking chair, a fire screen, a bundle of old magazines, a walnut highboy, and a Governor Winthrop some fool decorator had ruined with a coat of apple green paint. The whole lot for a used television, a shotgun, and $5. He felt a little bad about it. The Woodmans had been kind, fed him dinner, shown him round the farm. But a reputation for soft-headedness was worth having in his line of work, and there'd likely be more good trading out that way another day. He heard the television playing before he was even through the door, and went clattering down the basement stairs half in a panic. Because with the table set traded away, Abby's set was the only one left down there, and Abby's set was broken. It wasn't broken. It stood right where he and Beasley had set it that morning, and it was televising, clear and bright, in color. He was still staring at it, leaning on the stair rail, when a heavy step and a hearty voice came down after him. "Well, Hiram, I see you got it fixed. I told Abby you wouldn't have it done, but hey, it's in color. How'd you manage that, man?" Henry Horton came the rest of the way down with a stately tread and stood before the set with his hands behind his back, studying it in his best executive manner. "I just got fiddling around." Which happened to be the exact truth. Henry rolled a nail keg out and sat down on it, comfortable as a man at the theater. "That's the way it goes. There are men like you, Hiram, but there aren't many of them. Yankee tinkerers. You fool around with things, try one thing here and another there, and before you know it, you've come up with something. It's a prettier picture than anything I saw in Minneapolis, and I looked at every color set in the city." He found a cigar, offered it, shrugged when Taine declined, and lit it without ever taking his eyes off the screen. "Each man to his own. You remember how they all snickered when I started up the plant out here? Said I couldn't compete with the big companies back east. They quit snickering once I'd sold a couple dozen units and had orders backed up a year. I can't drive a nail or saw a board, Hiram, and I don't know the first thing about electronics, but I can organize. And you've got something here that could be worth a mint of money. Some little adaptation that'll fit on any set ever made. I'll cart this one up to the plant tomorrow and turn the boys loose on it. And before we're through, you'll be wading in $20 bills clear up to your knees. But I don't rightly know what I did. Doesn't matter one bit. Leave it all to me. I've got the plant, and whatever money we need, and we'll work out a fair split." He puffed contentedly a moment. "Say, Hiram, I've got an old computer sitting up at the plant. One of our first experimental jobs, went sour on us years back, and never came to a thing. Been meaning to junk it, but I sort of hate to. Wonder if you'd like it, just to tinker with. No obligation. Tear it down for the salvage if nothing else. There's thousands of dollars of parts in it. It might be interesting." "Good. I'll have the boys haul it over tomorrow, and plenty of help to get it down here and set up. I'll have them take Abby's set along too at the same time, and I'll tell her it isn't fixed yet. If she finds out it's working like this, I'll never talk her into a set of my own." Taine saw him out into the night and stood a while on the step, trying to shake a buzzing out of his head that wouldn't go. Too much had happened in one day, the ceiling, and now this. Down in the basement again, he found the back of the cabinet off and leaning against the bench. The screws laid out in a neat row on the floor, and the whole inside of the set rewired and strange. Tubes twisted out of shape, little white cubes of something tucked in here and there. A hurried, jury-rigged repair, as if whoever had done it had been interrupted and had to leave before finishing it properly. Someone, he thought. And then he remembered he'd filled the kettle for coffee that very morning, and the burner had caught first try. He hadn't had to kick the stove at all. He woke to someone sitting on his feet, only Towser, who had crawled into bed and lay sprawled across them, legs twitching after dream rabbits. Taine eased free and got up, remembering the truckload of furniture still sitting outside that needed getting down to the basement. Beasley was squatted on the back stoop when he came into the kitchen. "I quit them, Hiram. She kept pecking at me every minute of the day, and I couldn't do a thing to please her, so I up and quit. I was wondering, could I stay here, just for my keep, till I find something else?" Taine didn't like it much. Abby would be around by noon raising a fuss about him luring off her hired man. And dumb as Beasley might be, he did a power of work and took a power of nagging. And there wasn't another soul in town who'd put up with Abby Horton for wages. But he put on coffee and let the man talk. "Your ma used to give me cookies all the time. She was a real good woman, Hiram. My ma always said you Taines were quality, not like the rest of them putting on airs. Is it true this house has stood here going on 100 years? About that. My father used to say there never was a night in all that time some Taine wasn't asleep under this roof. Meant a lot to him, that did. Must be a fine thing to belong somewhere like that. Taine filled the kettle and turned the burner on, and by reflex hauled off and kicked the stove on his way. Back to the table, though there'd been no need to. The burner was already coming up a cheerful rose color. Twice in a row now. Gee, Hiram, this is a dandy set. It's broke. I don't think so. I just turned it on. It was warming up, a faint hum rising out of the tubes. And then a voice came in, gabbling away in something that wasn't any language Taine had ever heard. He spun the dial and station after station came up the same way, until he understood. Overnight. His 3950 table radio had turned into an all-band receiver, such as they advertised in the fancy catalogs. See if you can find someone speaking English. He went back to the eggs, none too steadily. First the television, now the stove, now the radio. He ain't after any woodchuck, Hiram. I snuck off yesterday. That's what Abby was so sore about, and helped him dig. Looks to me like he's turned up some kind of old tank out there, buried in the ground. Towser wouldn't dig for any tank. Maybe the woodchuck just denned under it. Maybe so. They spent the morning wrestling the new furniture down into the basement. The Governor Winthrop gave them real trouble, and Taine noted, with some relief, that the ceiling at least hadn't changed. By early afternoon, Towser's muffled barking across the road had gone on so long, and gotten so hoarse, that Taine finally fetched 2 shovels and a pick out of the garage. Come on. Let's put a stop to this before we get any peace at all. Towser had all but buried himself. Only the bedraggled tip of his tail showed above the hole. One edge of Beasley's tank showed at the bottom of it. And when Taine scraped the clay off with his jackknife and rapped it with the shovel, it gave back a ringing bell-like clang. Not metal, though it felt heavy as metal, more like cloudy glass, the kind of milk glass that China collectors paid good money for. They shoveled through the better part of the day to lay it bare, roughly, an oval hull 12 feet wide and 20 feet long. The size of a good parlor room, buried a good 10 feet down, all of it that same ringing milk glass from top to bottom. Whatever had come to live in his house, Taine thought, squatting there with his knife, had very likely come to earth in this. They'd have to be small, whoever they were, to make a home for Long and Thay. Cramped space between a house's floor joists, and small enough, too, to have fit into this. You know Abby's television set. They took it away. I told them they shouldn't, but they took it anyway. I forgot. Henry said he'd send that computer over. He'd clean forgotten, in all the excitement. It was near dusk before they finished uncovering the thing and started for home. Shovels over their shoulders, and stopped dead at the edge of the driveway. There was no garage. No front to the house at all. The gravel just ran up to a smooth curving wall where the whole front of the building ought to have been. As though somebody had taken hold of the 2 front corners and bent them slowly together until they touched. Taine ran around back in a kind of daze, half expecting to find the rear gone too. But the back of the house stood exactly as it always had. He went in through the kitchen at a dead run, and pulled up short at the living room door, staring. It should have been full dark outside. He'd seen the fireflies out, and the street lamps lit. But broad daylight was pouring in through the living room windows, over a stretch of land that was most certainly not Willow Bend. Beasley, look out there in front. The front door still opened, ordinarily enough, on the garage and the pickup truck. But the driveway ended a few feet past the truck's tailgate in bare sand, and beyond that lay a flat, blinding desert running geese. Out to a horizon that seemed too far away, under a huge white sun that hung, of all things, low in the north. He sent Beasley, shivering like a whipped dog, back inside to start supper, and walked the house alone. Front, desert attack. One side, the other side, desert. Around and back, the same smooth curved wall the front had worn the night before, and more desert past it. A door in, evidently, and no longer any door out the way they had come. Movement on the porch caught the tail of his eye, and he turned to see a line of small creatures come marching down the steps in perfect single file, spaced half a foot apart, 4 inches high or so. Running on all fours, though their forefeet were plainly little hands and not feet at all, rat-like pointed faces with something disturbingly human about them. Scaled hides that rippled as they moved, and thin, coiled tails standing straight up and quivering, like the tails on certain toys. He counted 16 of them as they went, straight and undeviating, out across the sand. In no hurry at all, and yet purposeful as an army on the march, until they were all but lost against the glare. There go the ones who fixed the television, he thought, and jiggered the stove and the radio into working right. The ones who came to Earth in that glass hull out in the woods. And if that hull had brought them here, then what in the world was out there past his own front door? He found, going back in, the neat 6-inch circle they had cut clean through his screen door to let themselves out, and thought that someday, when he found the time, he'd have to fix it. Down in the basement he found a new wall of the same seamless white stuff, sealing off the whole workshop end of the room. Henry's computer and Banker Stevens' lawnmower and every other piece of work in progress shut away behind milk glass that no axe would ever touch. They must have taken it for cooperation, he thought. Payment, maybe, for the loan of Henry's machine, or a trial run at seeing what this world's technology was good for before they built themselves a proper doorway with it. And it was none of Washington's business, and none of the village's either, he told himself, his stubborn Yankee business sense coming up hard through the fright. There was a sight of good real estate lying out there past his front door, and the only way in or out of it was straight through his own house, which by any reasonable reckoning made it his. Better he found out what was out there before some committee of city fellows came in and started running things. He nailed planks across every door and window in the house, but the one that opened on that other world. Loaded his deer rifle in a box of shells, filled a canteen, packed a sack of food enough for himself and the dog, and backed the pickup out through the garage with Towser riding the seat beside him, north, into the desert. The ground ran level and hard as a floor, easy driving, no worse than the back roads he traveled hunting antiques. Half an hour out he came up on the file of 16 marchers, still going steadily along, and slowed to pace them a while before giving it up and driving on past. They never so much as turned ahead. The sun stood exactly where it had stood before, unmoving in the north. A longer day here, he supposed, or a world that turned more slowly than his own. A low rise ahead carried a row of shining shapes strung along its crest, and through the binoculars they turned out to be 8. More of the same milk glass hulls, resting each in a cradle of gray stone, with empty cradles standing here and there among them. This was reconnaissance, he told himself, not exploring, and he let the hill be and drove on, keeping half an eye on the gas gauge. Nearing the half-tank mark he stopped to glass a smudge of white that kept fading in and out along the horizon, and made it out at last for a range of blue, snow-capped mountains, so distant even the glasses brought them in as little more than a haze. Sweeping the binoculars back down across the flats he found, crouched at the foot of a hillock still shadowed from the sun, a small stone house, rough masonry walls, a blunted cone of a roof hugging close to the ground, a dark oval doorway, no sign anywhere of a window. 10 minutes brought him to it. Towser lipped down growling, hackles up, and would not be coaxed from beneath the truck. Inside, the house was bare and very old, a rude stone bench along one wall, odd unfunctional niches hollowed into another, one rickety piece of wooden furniture whose use Taine could not begin to guess. A shepherd people, he thought, and a desert that might once, long ago, have been green rangeland. A second doorway opened toward the back of the house, and through it came, unmistakably, the sound of pouring rain, and on its heels a breath of salt wind. He crossed through into a raw, racing, storm-dark day, rain lashing cold against his face, and saw. Past half a mile of black tumbled boulders, a heavy sea flinging spray high against the sky. One world beyond his own front door was as much as any man ought reasonably to be asked to take. A second one, opening off the back of the first, was more than he could stand, and he backed inside again, shaking, salt rain running off his chin. Towser was gone. Not under the truck, not in the stone house, not anywhere he could see. And no answer came back when he called, his own voice falling flat and small into all that emptiness. He spent 3 hours at it, through the house and out into the rain among the boulders. Back to the desert and around the hillock and up its crest with the glasses, sweeping the flat in every direction, and found nothing at all, no track, no sign, no answering bark. Half blind with exhaustion by then, stumbling on his feet, he finally gave it up for the night as hopeless and worse than useless, and turned the truck back toward Willow Bend, following his own tire marks through the softer patches of sand, fighting to keep his eyes open the whole way. Passing again beneath the hill of moored hulls, he saw this time that there were only 7. Slightly past the halfway mark, a car came the other way and stopped. And Henry Horton and Beasley and a man wearing a sheriff's star piled out of it almost before it had finished rolling. "Thank God we found you, man. We were following your tracks. I wasn't lost. I lost Towser. I've got to go back out for him." "Not tonight, you don't." Between them they got him, protesting, into the back seat, while the sheriff climbed up into the pickup to drive it home behind them. "You've put us on the map, Hiram. We're on every newscast in the country, reporters swarming all over town, big officials on the way. This is going to be the making of us, I tell you." Taine was asleep before he got the sentence finished. He woke in his own bed with the shades drawn and lay a moment in the plain, ordinary piece of a room he had known his whole life, until memory clubbed him and he sat bolt upright. Now he could hear it, a low, steady murmur from outside the window. He eased a shade aside and saw a cordon of soldiers holding back a crowd that filled his backyard and the yards behind that, clear out of sight. His watch said 6, and from the slant of the light he knew it for evening. He'd slept the best part of a day around, with Towser God knew where the whole time, and the guilt of it got him moving. He found his shoes at the foot of the bed and went out to the kitchen, where he found Abby Horton, Henry, and a man in uniform waiting on him. "There you are. We were wondering when you'd wake up. Hiram, this is Colonel Ryan, National Guard. He's got his boys outside. I saw them through the window. Sorry to rush off, Colonel, but I've got to get back out and find my dog. This business is a good deal more important than any dog could be." "Then you don't know Towser. Best dog I ever had, and I've had a lot of them." But he sat down anyway. "Mr. Taine, I'd hoped you would see how the matter stands. It seems to me plainly your patriotic duty to cooperate with the government in this. We could exercise the right of eminent domain and start condemnation proceedings, but we would very much rather not have to. I doubt eminent domain even applies. As I understand it, that's for roads and public buildings. This is a road. A road right through your house into another world. And I think the government can show plainly enough that it's in the public interest. Then, I guess I'd better get myself a lawyer. If you're serious about that, I know a fine firm. Reasonable, too. And they'd represent your interests most ably. You've a great deal to answer for, Taine, starting with exactly how you engineered this business. Are you ready to explain that?" "No, I don't believe I am." He felt his stomach drop at the thought of the FBI and the Pentagon descending on him for an explanation he flatly did not have. The colonel marched out and slammed the door behind him. "Do you really mean to stand up to them, Hiram?" And when Taine said he did, sore clean through at being pushed around in his own kitchen, Well, good for you. It'd be plain unneighborly of me to leave you to fight it alone, and since we're already partners in this television business, it stands to reason I ought to stand with you on this, too. We'll hire ourselves some legal talent, form up a land company, and see this new world of yours gets developed the way it ought to be. I was born in this house, lived here my whole life, and there isn't one of them's bothered even to ask me what I think ought to be done with it. Beasley came banging in through the back with an armload of empty gasoline cans, 5 in each hand, clattering like a one-man tin can band, and Henry, unruffled, explained they'd tried running a big storage tank in through the kitchen and found the whole house boarded up inside with the same stuff Taine had found in the basement. Hit it with an axe and it turned the blade, so now they were making do with cans and a garden hose, and could it? Taine see his way to letting them borrow a plane too, disassembled, piece by piece, to cover more ground once the exploring started. There isn't anybody hauling a plane through my house. This has been my family's place for near 100 years, and I own it. And nobody's got the right to come in here high-handed and start hauling freight through it like it was a depot. He was still worked up about it when the back door slammed and Beasley came tearing back in, shouting, "Towser's back! And he's driving in the biggest woodchuck you ever laid eyes on." Taine was out the door before Beasley finished. It did, at a glance, look considerably like a woodchuck the size of a man, walking upright on its hind legs with a kind of injured dignity, one eye always on Towser, who trailed a wary, respectful 100 feet behind, working him the way a good sheepdog works a stray. The creature came up near the house, turned smartly around to face back out across the desert, and settled down on its haunches to wait. Taine scooped up his dog and hugged him hard, getting a sloppy, grateful tongue across the face for his trouble. Everything, he thought, holding on to that ridiculous animal, was all right now. That Chuck's a friendly cuss. He's waiting on someone. And I can talk to him, Hiram. That's nice. Not really listening, busy filling Towser's water dish. At 7:30, they caught the evening news, and the man from New York talked about nothing else. Radio Moscow demanding the United Nations take over this gateway to another world. Reporters thick around the cordon. A team of scientists just out of an all-day conference at the White House. France and Britain and Bolivia and Mexico and India all asking leave to send their own observers. The whole world sitting up waiting on a word out of one quiet antique dealer's front yard. And Henry Horton, the announcer added dryly, had been dropping heavy hints all day about his own part in the affair. Taine reached over and snapped the radio off. Sounds like we're going to be overrun with foreigners. Foreigner, Taine thought, was a word that hardly meant anything anymore. Not with alien life next door. Literally next door, through his own front hall. Somebody, something, had found a way clean around the light years, and once a door like that was opened, it just stayed open. Easy after that as walking out of one room and into the next. The little rat-like surveyors were explorers, most likely, planting their doorways and moving on to the next world and the next. And the creature, sitting so companionably out there with Beasley, was contact already made. Quiet and undramatic, the two of them watching the desert together like old friends. If it all went as easy as that, he thought, there wasn't a thing in the world to worry about. There's someone coming. Taine looked and saw nothing. Neither do I, but Chuck says he sees them. And then Taine saw them too. 3 dots far off, coming on fast, that resolved as they came into 3 small, ebony black humanoids in sky blue vests, riding, with no horses under them at all, in saddles that hung a good yard off the ground, floating along steady as a porch swing. They pulled up short 100 feet out and swung down, leaving the saddles hanging empty in the air behind them. And Taine got to his feet and walked out to meet them bare-handed, on the notion that the least a man could do was greet another world with clean, empty hands. They say hello. They say Welcome. How in the world do you? Chuck tells me what they say, and I tell you. You tell me, I tell him. He tells them. That's what he's here for, Hiram. I told you I could talk to Towser too, only you always thought I was funny in the head. They say that they want to dicker. Now that, Taine understood clean through. Of all the things one people might trade another, an idea costs nothing to ship and unsettled no one's economy overnight. And he sat himself down cross-legged in the sand across from the three of them, feeling, for the first time since all this had started, entirely on his own ground. Ask them what they'll take for the notion behind those saddles of theirs. They say, what have you got to offer? He ran through the possibilities in his head. Automobiles, houses, cloth, the whole inventory of Earth. And struck every one of them out. Whatever this outfit had, it was plainly better than anything Willow Bend could show them. Then it came to him. Ask them about paint. They say, what is paint? Something you spread over most any surface. Protects it against weather and rust and rot. Comes in every color there is, and it's cheap to make besides. They say they're just a little interested. Go on and tell them more. Taine settled himself deeper into the sand, feeling entirely at home for the first time all week. Across from him sat three of the flattest, most unreadable faces he had ever tried to read in a lifetime of trading. And the best dickering opposition, he thought with real satisfaction, that he had come up against in years. Tell them that maybe I spoke too quick back there. Paint's a mighty valuable idea, when you get right down to it. And settled in to skin them, fair and square, out of that saddle. Hours later, Henry Horton turned up with an anxious, faultlessly dressed stranger, carrying an attaché case. And the two of them stopped dead on the steps at the sight of Taine squatted in the dirt daubing paint on two. Aboard, while three paint-streaked aliens watched him with close attention, boards and old paint cans scattered all around. Hiram, may I present Mr. Lancaster, a special representative of the United Nations. Glad to meet you. I could use some help, if you've got it to give. May I ask exactly what it is you're doing? I'm dickering. Dickering. What a quaint, an old Yankee word with a meaning all its own. Trade with a man, and you're exchanging goods. Dicker with him, and you're out to get his hide. Hiram here is the sharpest dickerer in the county. I'm trading them the idea of paint for the idea behind those saddles hanging in the air over there. Only I'm stuck. I don't know the first thing about how paint's actually made, the chemistry of it. And I haven't got anybody who'll make sense of the saddle once they hand the idea of it back to me. I need a chemist, and I need somebody who'll understand an anti-gravity rig when he hears one described. And this is Beasley, who happens to be a telepath. Talks to that critter over there, and the critter talks to the rest of them. Ridiculous, Lancaster began, and then stopped, watching one of the three aliens climb unhurried into an empty floating saddle, ride it a few feet back and forth on nothing at all, and step neatly down again. Remarkable. Complete anti-gravity control. We could certainly find a use for that. That's exactly what I'm getting for one can of ordinary house paint. If somebody will get me the experts I need, and fast, and keep the brass off my back while I work, I won't work with nobody else. You send Hiram off, I go right along with him. He's the only person in this whole town that ever treated me like I was somebody. He means every word of it. There isn't a more stubborn man in the county than Beasley, mister, and good luck finding yourself another telepath on this whole planet. Lancaster looked for a moment, like a man being slowly strangled by his own necktie. All right. All right. Anyone you need, Mr. Taine, I'll have here within hours. And a standing pool of experts within a day or two besides, on call whenever you want them. Only please, go on as you were. This is not a chance we can afford to let slip through our fingers. Keep Washington and all the rest of them off my back, and we'll get along just fine. Lancaster and Henry went off together toward the reporters waiting at the cordon. And Taine turned back to the three patient, paint-flecked faces still waiting across from him in the sand. "It's a big front yard," and went back to work.